Okay, it is 6 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and call the Castle Hill Special City Council meeting into order and determine if a quorum is present. A quorum is present. We are missing Mr. May, who is traveling internationally because his husband's being recognized overseas. So unfortunately, travel conflict, but we will proceed on. First item of business is presentation by representatives from Vaquero Multifamily Inc. on proposals for the lofts of Castle Hills. I believe we have some representatives here from Vaquero that are going to provide a presentation. We'll also follow up with a presentation on the structure. And this is all designed on giving you, the citizens, the opportunity to ask questions, provide feedback shortly after the presentations. We'll proceed. A real bit note of housekeeping. Our city secretary, Ms. Tedford, has reminded me if you'd like to speak, there's a sign up in the back. Oh, okay. Okay, so we have a couple people signed up and we will allow people to speak as well if you're not signed up. Oh, that's fine. Right off the side. Which way?
But she might not want, if she's not like. Let's see what we got, right?
Good evening. My name is Jared Thierth. I'm the Senior Vice President of Vaquero Ventures. I work with the developer of this proposed approximately 300 unit multifamily site. I'm going to walk you through the site plan first, and then I'll go through the renderings of what we're proposing. To get your bearings, this is Military here, North Winston Lane, and then Lock Hill, Selma. There's a shopping center on this side over here. Los Azulejos is kind of on the end cap over there. And then you've got some office condos here, and then there's a car wash right here, kind of, I guess, southwest or planned south of the site plan right here. Again, it's approximately 300 units. We're proposing a single egress ingress right here off of Winston. When residents come in, when they exit, they can either go left or they can go right to Lock Hill. There's a secondary you'll see back here, and I know it may kind of be hard to see, but there's a secondary egress ingress back here. That's for life safety, fire, police, and ambulance back here. It's also for the move-ins and the trash as well. Secondary back of house back here. There is no entrance into the garage, so it's kind of a hammerhead back here, you know, a 3-point turn, and then they'd have to turn around and then go back out that way. But it does not enter the garage. The only entrance into the and exit into the garage is over here, kind of central on North Winston Lane right there. We're proposing a 4-story multifamily building, which I'll show you guys or show you all in a minute. The units wrap the garage, so you won't be able to see the garage from the street. You know, it'll all be multifamily or residential around it. This kind of shaded area right here is for the amenities, you know, leasing office, clubhouse, fitness center, yoga studio. We're proposing a golf simulator in there as well, and probably a couple other amenities that overlook the single courtyard right here. That's the pool, kind of centrally located in this single courtyard right there. The average square footage is approximately 800 square feet. It's very fluid, but you know, that's kind of where we are. That's kind of where we stand right now. There's a dog park located in this vicinity back here. And I think that's it as far as the site plan. I'll go through the renderings now. Let me grab those. Here's the rendering. It's conceptual, subject to change, but we're proposing something contemporary. We're kind of standing at the corner, the hard corner of, this is Military right here and the Winston Lane right there. So kind of looking, I guess, southwest direction. 4 stories, pretty contemporary. We'll have some lighting up here, possibly the leasing office we're proposing at the hard corner. Some festoon lighting, some hardscaping, some landscaping. There's an easement here, so we do have to set the building back some. Trying to make it very pedestrian friendly. There's currently no sidewalk or lighting along Winston Lane. So, it will propose, and I guess Military, Lock Hill on this backside right here. So, we would construct a sidewalk with lighting all the way around the Winston and Lock Hill sides. Here you can't see it, but a little bit further out of view right here is the entrance for the garage. Approximately midway down Winston right there. Lots of glazing, trying to get some storefront look along the ground floor, trying to get aiming to get 10-foot ceilings throughout, including 12 on the ground floor. I think that's everything on that rendering. Yeah, hand me that one. Here, yeah, thank you. Here's a proposed bathroom rendering. As pretty contemporary finishes, European type cabinetry, chrome hardware, frameless shower enclosures. And I apologize if it's hard to see with the glare, but frameless glass enclosures. We have in here wood look flooring, but we'll probably do more of a tile for here as well. Rain shower head, frame. It's kind of hard to see in this rendering, but it's, a framed vanity mirror right here, a quartz, very clean looking countertop. This is for a 2-bedroom or the 1-bedroom master with the double vanity that we're proposing. Faucets, the chrome hardware everywhere, can lights. Anyways, just to give you guys an idea, it's conceptual, but that's more or less what we're aiming for right there. This is a proposed kitchen, similar motif concept here. You've got your, white quartz countertop and undermount sink. Front control range, very sleek. On this one we rendered back painted tile backsplash. Stainless steel appliances. We usually try to do 2 schemes. This particular one is rendered in white gloss. It may be hard to see. But that's that. And, we usually do a lighter color and then maybe a slightly darker color. European type cabinets, the chrome hardware again, as mentioned in the bathroom. But that's kind of give you an idea of what we're proposing for the kitchens.
Mr. Thierth?
Yes.
You'll leave those up so that people can come up to them
Yes,
afterwards.
as soon as I'm done, we're going to
them?
put them back, back up there so everyone can see them individually.
Perfect. Thank you.
And this is a proposed, the clubhouse right here. We always like when you enter, you can see right through to the courtyard in the back. It's maybe hard to see again, but there is a pool back here, 2 stories. The leasing office would be to the side that we can segregate at evenings. So residents still have 24/7 access to it outside of the leasing office. We'll do a billiard room, a conference center, especially with COVID. We'll probably do micro conference rooms as well as kind of the traditional larger conference room, kind of what we call breakout rooms as well. We anticipate a handful of residents that'll work from home and that they'll utilize the micro conference, or what we call the micro conference rooms. But anyways, this should give you all an idea of what we're proposing right here. So this is a conceptual clubhouse. Okay, Mayor, I'm going to set them back up over here individually so everyone can see them as they come up.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Thierth, did you have anything else left on that presentation?
No, I'm sorry, that's it.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Okay, next we have a presentation by representatives from the City of Castle Hills Legal Counsel Bracewell LLP on the proposed public facility corporation structure and the Castle Hills Community Development Program. We have with us Mr. Jim Plummer and Ms. Summer Greathouse.
Good evening. I am an attorney who works for the city. I don't work for the developers, but I'm going to give you a lot of information about the project, and I'm going to try and focus it from the city perspective. This project is a project which we believe cannot be financed without having a public facility corporation involved. Oh, I'm sorry. Goodness, I'm not used to people not being able to hear me. So, as I said, this project is a project that we believe cannot be financed without a public facility corporation involved. The rents that you can obtain from this piece of property in Castle Hills are not sufficient to finance this project and to pay the taxes. So the developer has come to your city and has asked your city to participate with it in this project so that they can bring about this apartment project. The structure of the transaction would be that the city would create a public facility corporation. That public facility corporation would own the project. They would enter into a 75-year lease with the development entity. The development entity would go out and raise the money for the project. This is a $63 million investment in your community. They have to raise that money. It's not city money. City doesn't have its name on anything to do with the debt or the equity. It is their liability. Then they build the building. Once we close this transaction, they will pay the city an upfront fee currently proposed at $250,000. They will then pay the city 25% of the taxes, all taxes that would have accrued on this building. The 25% was selected because your city taxes are 21% of the overall tax rate. So we selected a number slightly larger than what the city would have gotten if this building had been built and fully paid taxes. In addition, when this project is sold, the city will receive 25% of the net sale proceeds of that sale. To give you an idea of what these numbers mean, the city will be paid an administrative fee currently proposed at $25,000. They'll be paid about $250,000 a year to offset the taxes. And in the year of sale, they'll be paid approximately $5 million from the profits from this transaction. So that's basically the structure, and there's some questions you should be asking. First question we get, why 75 years? That is an absurdly long amount of time, and that is true. But that is what you have to do in order to get the bank loan to finance these deals. I've done 15, 20 of these deals with this structure. I've tried to get the banks to agree to shorter terms, and I have been unsuccessful. They simply won't do it. Now, the question is, will this be going on 75 years from now? I seriously doubt it. All projects need to be revamped, rehabilitated. And so this deal will be renegotiated at somewhere in the future. But your lease term must be 75 years. At the end of the 75 years, the city will own the building outright, and it will be their building. We will enter into a development agreement. That development agreement will give the city complete say, or actually approval, of anything to do with this project. It's just like any other partnership. Partners have to agree. And your city has the right to demand certain things in this partnership. They will review all plans, they'll review all budgets, they'll sign off on everything. So far, a traffic study has been conducted. An engineering study to work on the drainage has been conducted or is being conducted. We're going to have them do a retail study to see how this might affect the retail in your community. There will be a market study. There will be a cost analysis done by cost experts to make sure that the budget is appropriate. The equity investors for this deal will put in about $23 million. The debt on the deal will be about $40 million. So you'll have a commercial bank reviewing this transaction and confirming that they can support the debt that's on the project. One of the things you should be asking yourself is, what's the real advantage to my city? Why are we doing this? And there's really two answers. The first answer is you're getting a quality product that you would not get otherwise, and you're doing it in a format that gives you control. Your city council will have control over what this project looks like. You know, they tell you, okay, here's a rendering. Well, before we close this deal, we're going to have design drawings. We're going to know what the project looks like. You'll know all of the building materials for the project, and the city can say yes or no. You will have virtually say in what the financing looks like and whether it's acceptable to the city. And then you're going to enter into a lease. And in that lease, you are the landlord. And as a landlord, you have rights. And all of that will be spelled out in the lease. If in fact these people don't do what they say, they will be in default under their lease. And we'll send them a notice that says you're in default. We're going to terminate. And the bankers will go nuts and it'll get fixed. If they don't fix it, ultimately, let's just say that we get down the road and they're not complying with the lease provision. You would sue them, terminate the lease. You would own a $63 million building. Now, are you going to run a $63 million building? No. You're going to sell it, or you're going to bring in another developer to operate it. City will not have any portion of the operations of this facility in terms of the day-to-day operations. That will be left up to a professional management contract. The lease will provide that the building must be maintained as a Class A apartment project. That means that it's got to be an apartment project, and we probably will pick some and say, you've got to maintain this building the same as this building, this building, and this building are being maintained around town. And it's got to be a top-end project. Once again, you're the landlord. If they do not maintain the building, they will be in default under their lease. You would then have a right to sue them to terminate the lease. Nobody's going to want the lease terminated because then you own the building and the debt and equity simply have no way to recover. So one of the things the city gets is they get a lot of control over this project. So let's talk about what happens if you don't do the project. So right now it's vacant land. It's been vacant land forever. What's going to happen? Well, we don't know. Most likely it stays vacant land. Remember, I told you that right now you can't afford to build this apartment project without the PFC's involvement. So another apartment developer is not going to come in and be able to build this project. Somebody might be able to build a lower grade project. Somebody might be able to build a smaller project. But if they do, the economics aren't going to be the same. Let's just say for a minute that you say, okay, we're not doing this deal. What's going to happen? Well, let's assume it's retail. Okay. So a retail development goes on that site. We happen to have a retail development across Winston. The retail development pays $25,000 a year to the city and $6,000 of sales tax. This project will pay you, if my math is right, 10 times that a year. So economically, there is a reason to do this deal. Now, you say, well, what if your projections are wrong? And that's possible. And they only make half the money they're supposed to make. Then the value of the building goes down. but you're still getting the same thing you would have gotten if the building was taxable, because the formula says pay 25% of the tax value. So you're still getting the same exact taxes you get no matter what happens. It's just you're starting with a $63 million investment instead of a smaller one. The other thing is, look at your retail. Would you say that retail next door is Class A? I wouldn't. And that's because once something is built and approved for zoning, you no longer have any say. You can have code violations, you can have problems and send the police, but you don't have any say. In this transaction, you have a say about how the property is maintained. And that's an important thing for this community. And so what this project is offering is the ability to have input. It is offering certainty, because if you don't do this transaction, you do not know what's going to happen. You may not get anything. You might get retail. You might get an office building, but you're not going to have any say over it. So from kind of a big picture perspective, one of the real advantages to a government entity is an ongoing involvement and an ongoing say. And then the next thing is the economics. We have designed this product so that you will never receive less than you would have received in taxes. And if the project is successful, you will receive many, many times what your taxes would have been. Even if the project is not as successful as these guys suggest, you're still going to be better on the tax side because you're going to collect more money. Let's assume it back again to the retail. On the day we close this deal, you're going to get 10 times what the retail center next door pays the city a year. And one of the things I want to be clear about, we haven't negotiated this deal completely because your city hasn't even taken any steps towards creating this. We haven't started negotiating. So I think the deal will improve when we do start negotiating. But to the extent there are concerns, and trust me, your council has expressed many concerns, we will try to address them in the documents. For example, the Class A concept. We now have 2 pages of what does that mean in the notes that I have. One of the questions is, okay, we're making $5 million when these guys sell. How do we know they're going to sell? This is such a great deal. Why don't they just hold it? So we're going to put in a provision that says they have to sell within 7 years, because that's where you really receive a big profit. But they only have to sell if they can make the returns they're supposed to make. But if the thing's going well, they're going to have to either sell or refinance it and pay the city out. So there are quite a few provisions that will come into this transaction as we negotiate it. One of the things that is helpful for all of us is to hear from you about what your concerns are, so we can try and address those concerns. And that's part of what this meeting is about, is to try and give you answers, figure out what your concerns are, and try and find a way to address them. So we'll be available for questions when the presentations are done.
Thank you, Mr. Plummer. Okay, next we will proceed to citizen questions and comments. We do have a couple people signed up. I do want to add that this is the first of 2 town halls. The next one will be March 5th at 10 a.m. That's a Saturday. Want to make sure that we're offering differing schedules to make this as accessible to anybody that's interested. That being said, we will proceed with the Q&A or comments. First up, we have Mr. Robert Wynn.
Evening. I'm a real estate manager for Frost Bank. I manage probably 150 properties, landlord for probably 100 different properties. I can tell you landlording is not fun. It's a lot of work. So to say that the city is going to become a landlord makes me very nervous. And to think that we would take on this project and the litigation involved when we have to go do something to enforce this lease it's going to be very expensive and we don't have the money for it. So the risk is just not worth it, in my opinion. I sent over, thanks to the city manager, a paper, hope you got this, regarding the traffic study, which I think is just ridiculous. They're saying at a $450 car garage and 300 residents, you assume there's another 100 cars or so, maybe 25% is going to be there. And they're saying there's 138 cars that are going to be going in and out of there in the morning and 168 in the evening. Really? 450 car garage, and at least 25% of the people there having some kind of guest or relationship, deliveries, whatever. That's 550 potential cars a day. So I just don't understand where you're coming from with that. The zoning, why are we doing the zoning when there hasn't been approval by the council? We're trying to get the zoning. This is next Tuesday, March 1st. We haven't even had the second meeting for this. And we're having the zoning here to change this to an apartment from business use, changing the character of of the property. And they're saying this is the only thing that'll work for this property. It's the only thing that'll work. Then the city council needs to decide that that's appropriate before we go rezone this property. If this is the only apartment complex that will work for this property. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Okay. I believe we have somebody here with the traffic engineer firm, Kimley Horn. If you don't mind, please, I hate to put you on the spot.
It's awkward what we're facing. So we did do a traffic study already for this development. We coordinated the study intersections and the study parameters with the city. So we're not projecting only 500 trips a day. So there's actually, if you, in the study, there's about 2,400 trips per day that would be associated with the development. But what we're looking at is how many of them are occurring in a single peak hour period. So, you know, between 7 and 8 or 8 and 9, 7:30 and 8:30. So the morning for residential areas, apartment complexes, any of these uses does stretch more than just that hour. So we look at the projected highest hour in the morning and in the afternoon for the particular use. And when we base those numbers, they're based off of nationwide studies, counts that are done at actual complexes. That data has been recently revamped. So they tossed all the really old stuff. So we've got a lot fresher, newer data in that national data set than we've had in a number of years. We did use a very conservative rate for this project. So if you've looked at the study and you see that it shows as low rise, that's actually really a more conservative rate. So if you looked at the rate for a mid-rise or high-rise apartment complex, that's actually a lower rate. So we wanted to use the most conservative multifamily rate that was available in the manual, went into this. So just if you're looking through it and you see that low rise, that's actually a conservative decision, not one that's meant to make the numbers look lower. And I'll be happy to answer, I guess, any other questions as they come up, but that's on the trip generation study and the peak hour discussion point.
Thank you so much.
So the peak hour rate in the morning is 0.46 trips per dwelling unit. So that translates into 138 trips during the morning peak and 168 trips in that evening peak period. Yeah, and so on that, what we did is we counted for 2 hours at the study intersections, and we picked the highest hour at each of the study intersections. So it's the highest hour that you all are experiencing. And that is the hour that we added these trips to.
What is the hour?
Just one moment. Let me flip to the page.
And how can it be 0.4? I mean, most
Right.
everybody that's living there is going to be going to the job.
But they're not necessarily all doing it between 7:30 and 8:30 or 7 and 8. So yes, ma'am. But so it's happening over the course of a number of hours. You leave for work at 6:30, I leave for work at 7:15. I don't know what time other people leave for work, but we all leave at a little bit different time. So they're not all leaving at exactly the same time. And that's based on studies from around the country of how various residential properties operate. So unlike a school or another use that has a very set start and finish time, people tend to ebb and flow out of residential land uses. So
So is the study directed primarily at the impact of Northwest Military or both Northwest and Lockwood?
both of those intersections, so the study intersections that we looked at were both ends of North Winston. And we looked at both of
The
those.
concern I have is Lock Hill is only one way,
Correct.
north to south,
Mhm.
with no control device. And
Well, there's no,
Northwest Military has the school right across the street from the proposed housing that is busy, as Chief Love said, from 6:30 probably till 9. So I guess the concern is the 0.4 valuation for the 300 units property. Seems kind of low when you're taking into consideration that one of the egresses is only at one lane street. Northwest or Lockett.
well, there's no
Correct.
egress on Lock Hill.
Right, everyone would be on Winston, but they can
Yeah.
split and go either to military or to Lock Hill. Yeah.
Either to Lock Hill or to
Yes.
Northwest.
Mhm.
And Lock Hill is the one lane street. at Winston.
Yeah,
As
in
is
that
Winston.
direction. Mhm. Yes. It's not random. So the 2 hours, yeah. Yeah, because when we look at the spread of traffic over the course of a day, the traffic at 6:45 in the morning and the traffic at 9:15 in the morning are drastically different than the traffic you'll see between those other 2 hours. So by counting that 2-hour block that catches the start times for the majority of the schools in your area, really all of them for their official start times. I realize some may have before school programs that may start before 7. I'm not aware of any that do, but by catching that really big window where we're catching all those different groups, and looking at that, a distinct peak emerges. So that's how we narrow it down to the 7 to 9 and 4 to 6. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, so these are actually really, really fresh counts. We originally were going to collect them on the 20th of January, and we had a threat of bad weather, so we pulled the plug, postponed it, and they were done 2 weeks after that on a lovely day with no threat of bad weather. So midweek, no holidays around. We always look for those midweek days when people aren't making long weekends, not near any school or state holidays.
So was the time study just done on one day?
Yes.
But we're still, a lot of people aren't even at work because of COVID.
Yeah, and so that's actually a really interesting trend nationwide. I can provide some really interesting articles on that. The landscape of how we're living and working is changing, but all of your local schools are back in session. A lot of the people who are still working from home may continue to do so. So,
And they may not.
correct. But as an industry, in benchmarking the travel trends over time, we've largely rebounded and believe we're settling into a new normal. It is a little different than it was 5 years ago, but it is more stable. Yes, ma'am. So that was a request after we were directed to begin the study. And so we have collected data. We do not have it back yet for those streets. Yeah, the question was about Winston as it goes on the other side of Military, Foxhall, and there is one other street. So City Council did request that we add 2 intersections to the study area after we had already started the study. So those are not included in this because that data is imminent. You may see the data collection equipment out there. You may have seen it last week. I don't know exactly which day it's coming back. We will be adding that to the study. We do not project that a lot of these folks, I know a lot of the traffic that is seen in the neighborhood, a lot of it trends towards some of the schools that are in the area. We don't anticipate a significant amount of people would choose those routes, given the proximity of Lock Hill, Selma, and Northwest Military. Okay, I took out my appendices because I thought it would make it easier to hold. Let me grab them off my chair.
Mayor, can I ask a question while she's getting this information? I don't believe the council has received this traffic study. I guess that's not a question, it's a statement.
Mr. Rapley, we have the traffic study that we can put out to council, right?
Yes, we,
Okay, and hopefully that's something that we can put on the website.
Yes, we need to apply under the FOIA ourselves.
so again, Mayor, yes, it had been completed late last week. We can forward that to council. I know it was included in the zoning packet for the SUP that's going to zoning next week, possibly. But Mrs. Tedford can print it out right now for you and I can get it to y'all as well.
Please, and let's make sure we put it online so it's accessible.
And the streets that were requested were South Winston, I believe West Castle and Fox Hall to be added to the study.
I don't have the data back yet. So as soon as it comes back, we will quickly look through that and add it as a supplement.
And I don't want to get into the weeds right now. This may be a question that goes into the weeds, but my question is the concept of surveying local streets and intersections versus data that you have from existing, quote unquote, existing similar apartment complexes. How do you make a transition? Again, if this is too much of the weeds.
No,
we'll
it
talk later.
absolutely not. I mean, I'm happy to explain it. So the Institute of Transportation Engineers is a nationwide organization that collects this data. They're constantly collecting it. They'll collect 24-hour data at various complexes. They do it for all different kinds of development. In the last round, we lost the Blockbuster. They took out the video rental store, but they're always updating it. So they've added food truck parks, different things that are newer that we haven't seen in the past to really keep that data as fresh as possible. So that's where it comes from. So it's surveyed. A lot of the sites that they survey are in the high growth areas like ours. There's a lot of the actual studies are done in Texas, Florida, a lot of the high growth states, because that's where this type of development is happening. So that is a nationwide average that is an industry standard to use. If you look at the Institute of Transportation Engineers recommended practice for performing traffic studies, this is the resource that they use. And so that just provides the rates. And then we apply that rate to the number of units in the complex. And then the local traffic conditions tell us when that peak is that we need to add those trips to.
That one day survey, that you did, how is it valid that there's more than one day? And how do you know that day is absolutely that perhaps let's say over a month period of time, you better have an idea of what the traffic situation.
Yeah, so there's really a practical standpoint to collecting that volume of data. It's about $600 a day per intersections account. And when we've looked again with the Institute of Transportation Engineers state of practice, by counting on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, which are the midweek days that stay away from the intersections in weeks without holidays, outside of really strange weather events, we make sure that when they collect that that there's no construction in the area or anything abnormal, right? So we look for the most normal, boring Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday we can possibly find. But we're trying to do that in a manner of also not drowning in a month's worth of data. So that's the state of the industry, and that's best practice for performing traffic studies, is to look for that common day when people are behaving as normal as we hope that they can, which is, I don't know. I don't know about that one, but that is the approach we take to finding that day that is most representative.
And if it is not representative, what would you say about the outliers? In other words,
We don't, yeah. So when TxDOT does their annual traffic count program, which is how we establish the background growth rates, they'll collect for a week at a time. And digging through that data, there's not as much a fluctuation. For every person that leaves early on Tuesday, there's someone that leaves late on Wednesday. and it comes out largely in the laundry. So in places where we have done multi-day tube counts for traffic signal timing studies or other uses, there's a lot of consistency. It's actually frighteningly consistent between those midweek days. People leave early on Fridays. That is, you see that in the, you definitely see that in the data when you're looking at it. Mhm. Yes. Just a moment. That in the morning. There are a lot of figures. When you guys get this, you'll understand why I tabbed things, but I did not tab enough things. Or I guess if I tabbed that many things, I still couldn't have found anything. Okay. First 11 by 17 page. Oh my gosh. Okay. So Northwest Military during the morning peak in the southbound direction, the day we counted, there were 1,100 vehicles going southbound just through movements. The morning peak? Correct. Yes, in an hour. So 1,000 or 1,095 is what we counted. Southbound, there were some turning vehicles during that time as well. But that was the through volume, and the corresponding northbound through volume at that time was 658. So still a really healthy northbound volume, not as much directionality as some corridors have. In the evening, it's actually pretty much flipped. So we've got about 800 southbound and just shy of 1,100 northbound. So there's directionality, even though they are really quite balanced. So the report would be amended to add those 2 additional intersections that council asked that we add. So the way the actual ordinance is written, we've studied the intersections that were required by ordinance to study. The 2 intersections that were added were voluntarily added to make sure that we were addressing neighborhood concerns. They're largely going to be looking at existing system deficiencies because we're not anticipating that users of this development would be traveling those roadways. So, yes. Yes, I have definitely been there. So that's where looking at how many of them leave during the peak hour and how many of them are going to leave in a minute, right? So the traffic signals on Northwest Military are cyclic. When they turn green, a number of vehicles are able to go. That empties out space. We're talking over the course of an hour, not just, in those little snapshots. So I think maybe you can address that with the size of the units, the number of spaces in the garage. Yeah, I mean, there's a big incentive to the developers of this community to have adequate parking and not have a honk fest in there every morning, or people won't lease these units. And so that's part of making sure that they have adequate parking to satisfy their lenders, that this will be a successful product.
And what was said about average size of each unit?
800?
That is small. Oh my gosh.
Sorry, I'm trying to hear the question up here real quick.
When you look at the traffic count on Military, was there any time when you noticed that there was traffic? Somebody comes from North Winston, turns south onto Military, and the stoplight at Military and West Avenue causes traffic to back up. I'm interested in knowing if there was queuing going on with additional traffic enough traffic trying to turn south onto West Avenue.
Mhm.
Military, the
south.
light there, CVS. So that would be a case where the overflow might go through, might well, instead of waiting on the queue line on Northwest Military to turn onto West Avenue, that's a situation that I anticipate might be a situation where they would go straight through go through the intersection. And because when we have had construction, we have had that habit, people cutting through by that situation.
Well, they also have the option to go out on Lock Hill Selma and go up and hit west for there. So it's a right-hand turn and then another right-hand turn.
It's still going down West Avenue.
Correct. That's a West Avenue question. I was answering the military question.
Right, but if it were backed up, either case, either military or, I'm sorry, either military or Lock Hill Selma, that still has to do with congestion that could make coming through South Winston Lane look attractive.
Yeah, so, and I don't want to deny that there's traffic on military. I mean, the counts show that there's 1,100 vehicles an hour on military. But what we're looking at is incrementally what's being added. And when we look at the number of trips, we're talking approximately 1 to 2 cars. We're not talking about just in the volume of vehicles that we're looking at. I don't want to say you won't notice them because I don't want you guys to come after me because I'm sure you will notice them. But they will be absorbed better into the system than a more dense use, than a peakier use, for lack of a better term. An office building where everybody starts at 8, leaves at 5, that's going to have a more defined peak than these will, because people may all leave their offices at 5 to head home, but they're not all going to get there at exactly the same time. They're going to get there at varying times, unless they all work together. But they're going to have different commutes, and they're going to trickle in more. And so that's really the distinction between this type of use and an institutional use, like an office or a school or something of that nature, where everything's happening at exactly the same time. This is individuals in the way they live their lives. And so there's definitely more of a spread out nature to the patterns of traffic that we see.
Okay, if we don't have any more questions, go ahead, Mr. Kelly.
Yeah, certainly. My name's Amy Avery. I'm with Kimley Horn. So the way the development code is written, the developer is responsible for performing a traffic study, a drainage study, and all the engineering that's associated with their development. But the city will review the study. They have the ability, they set the scope, they tell us what to study, and they review the content that we provide. Okay, that's not my, I'm gonna let somebody else jump that one. I think that's in the works, right? I heard that was in the works, yeah.
And I thought we had an ordinance, nothing above 3 stories in Castle Hills. What happened to that?
Mr. Rapley?
So again, that would require a variance from the Board of Adjustments, which we're not there yet. Obviously, eventually this is going to have to go through zoning, through architecture review, through BOA for a number of steps involved in this development process. We have our own engineers that are going to review this traffic study as well. And so that'll be provided at the next meeting, I believe.
So I think the overarching concern is that every due diligence that we would do for a regular development was going to be done for this building if we proceed. So excuse me? It's my,
Before the zoning reg, when it is being changed to suit the developer, it is commercially zoned and the zoning is being requested to be changed to suit the developer. All the due diligence should be done before that zoning hearing. We should know what we as are getting for our taxpayer money. 75 years. We should know it. You all should know it. You represent us. You are protecting us. You're not supposed to be sitting there telling the developers. That's what you're doing. You're the developer set the timeline, not us.
so
It should be just.
So as I was just about to say, we're going to hold off on the zoning until we can get more clarification. I believe,
So,
Mr.
Mayor,
Rafferty.
I had Mayor, sorry, let me jump in. I had a conversation with our zoning chairman, and I wanted to make sure we confer with our city attorney, who was not available yesterday, because our zoning commissioner would like to hold off until more due diligence is done and there's more action by council at the time. So let me finish real quick. So again, I got to confer with our city attorney, who is out of town, but that is the chairman's prerogative to do that. And so once we confer tomorrow and do that, there's a chance that it might be postponed again.
And also.
Ma'am, I said a chance, but again, I have to speak to the city attorney.
Workforce housing.
I think that's the developer to relay that.
My name is Scott Reimer. I'm with Ventures. I'm happy to postpone.
Can you speak to the
Sure.
microphone, please?
Sure. My name is Scott Reimer, and I'm the president of Vaquero Ventures Multifamily, and I'm happy to postpone the zoning meeting. There's no hidden agenda to try to get there faster than you all are comfortable with. There's not any part of this process that we're interested in moving faster than y'all are interested in moving. So if postponing the zoning for a month is best suited for you all, makes no difference to me. We have from the onset tried to make sure that this is something that you all wanted, that this is something that fit within your community, and we're not trying to speed anything up. So if,
Workforce housing doesn't fit within our community.
well, that may be the case.
So you're willing to uphold zoning and not change zoning?
For me, for this use, I need the different zoning. So,
Not have, if the council citizens, and I think those will go to the council citizens, because our tax, that we should have the right to have a say in change zoning, which will then change it.
well, I can't speak to that. I know you have ordinances on the books that address zoning. And if the people that are put in place to manage that process want to approve our zoning, great. I wanted to simply offer that if you all want another month or whatever the process is because you feel like this is going too fast, happy to accommodate that. What I'm not willing to do is consider a different zoning for my use, or I'm not willing to. Correct. So I'm not willing to look at the property for any other use than what we have, what we've proposed. And if that doesn't fit, that doesn't fit. So I've said from the beginning, I have no interest in seeing anybody at HEB or any place that is up, you're never going to get consensus on everything, but I don't want to be involved in an upheaval. It's not of interest to me. There's no amount of deal money that's worth that. So, that's what we're trying to do by coming through this process. I happen to think your comment about the tax money, you're getting the most fantastic deal that you could possibly get, in my opinion.
We're not getting taxes for our city. For this.
Two things on that. Two things on that. This community, Castle Hills, is going to be getting, if I were to build this as a regular project, you all would collect about 21% of the taxes that were available to collect on this. In the structure that we're proposing, you're going to collect 25% of the assessed value of the tax, of the property. When it's completed, or at any time during the project, you're going to collect 25% per year of the value of the property. So you're already ahead from what you would be if I were to go build this as a market rate deal.
And all three entities.
No,
The school district.
no, no. So in the PFC statute, it allows the sponsoring entity, which in this case would be Castle Hills, to collect all of the taxes would be abated, and you're going to collect all of the revenue generated from it. School district, unfortunately, listen, this statute, the school district does not collect taxes. The hospital system does not collect taxes. The community college does not collect taxes. All of these various entities do not collect taxes. I will tell you, I do not believe your schools are impacted at all because they're funded at the legislature for every seat that's in the school. Correct, but they're also funded if a student is in the seat, they get a per student allocation. Well, I can tell you, Northeast Independent School District is not going to be impacted, not one bit on this transaction, except for if this goes out to a bond election, this property will not be assessed on the bond election valuation. That's where it would, and Jim, I would. I hope I've said it correctly. Okay. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
It requires us to have a certain minimum percentage of, and I forget the term, not low income.
Sure.
Is there a maximum? Residents that they?
So here's the very interesting thing about this structure that originally got me interested in doing one, and I've done 4 of them now. San Antonio's area median income is approximately $74,200 a year. 80% of that is roughly $60,000 a year. If you use a 35% income qualifier on that $60,000, that's how you calculate the rent that you can charge somebody. So you're talking about school teachers, firemen, police officers, first responders, really great. As a developer, I can tell you you either have really nice, incredible, out of reach housing, or you have. Sure, just a fantastic. It's a fantastic community. That's why we're here. We think this is a gem in San Antonio, and obviously that's why we think this would make a good fit for the community. So I think originally that may have been the case. Jim, I can tell you, I've done one in the Pearl, which is a very, booming area. Done one on Calabria in 1604. I don't consider that blighted. They did. I'm sorry. Yeah, look, I think the analysis, if I were in y'all's shoes, I'd want to know 2 things. 3 things. I'd want to know, is this traffic going to choke off my way of living? Am I going to get flooded by this use? And am I going to have neighbors that I don't want to have?
And what's the cost of the?
Yeah, so I can't answer the question for you all on, is this the kind of neighbor you'd want to have? I think so. I wouldn't mind at all having this in my community, but I understand the trepidation about it. I understand that you don't want an inferior product in your neighborhood. You don't want problems. I get it. I wouldn't want it either. I certainly wouldn't want the traffic, and I certainly wouldn't want the drainage problems. We have not asked Kimley Horn, and thank you very much for your taking these shots up here. They're all understandable, but we haven't influenced Kimley Horn not one bit. I don't care what the answer is. If the answer is this is going to create a problem for you all, I don't want to be involved in it. So the information is unfiltered from us. We may be paying Kimley Horn, but I haven't asked them to do one thing. I haven't asked our civil engineer to do anything that impacts in our favor the drainage. Because again, I don't care. If this is a problem for you all, I don't want to be involved. On the neighborhood side of this, I don't believe, I think for the size of the units that we're developing, I think you're going to have administrative assistants that work at Valero, USAA, you're going to have school teachers, you're going to have really great residents here.
At 550 square feet?
That's the norm. It may not be what you would live in, may not be what I'd live in, but it's what the millennials will live in. And these are these are folks that are used to doing that because it's an urban kind of environment and they're used to doing it. I wouldn't live there. Well, maybe I would. I don't know. If I were 25 or 27 or 30, sure. I'd have no problem. Bigger than some of the apartments I lived in when I went to UT. But
And that's around the college, and that's fine.
yeah, listen.
It's not in Castle Hills.
I think you're going to have, I can tell you what we're developing here is as nice as anything in the city of San Antonio. And it will provide a very, very solid neighbor for you all. And it will be one of those kind of categories that I just described. I believe in it. I think it provides great diversity to your community. I think it's going to activate your retailers. I think it's going to create business for restaurants. I think it's going to.
Can somebody who lives at 550 square feet eat at Clementine?
Probably, sure.
No.
Well, I mean, yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Sitting here doing some correct me if I'm wrong. But based on the numbers you're saying, roughly talking about 20,000 a year for rent.
Yeah, it's about 1,700 a month.
About 17, about 20,000.
Yes, sir.
And so anyone who's going to get this has to be able to afford 20,000 a year. So they're going to have to be getting like 1,000 or higher.
No. We have rental standards that won't provide for that. The lease will cover that. You can't load people up into the units. These are not adjusted for family sizes. Our goal. Yes, sir.
Can we just have one person at a time? So this would be a lot easier for everybody to hear if we can have one person at a time, please.
Talking about, question is, when people rent this apartment, you've done a market analysis.
Mhm.
You know you're going to get 300 people renting these apartments. Otherwise, you wouldn't be. And so what you're saying is that you can bring 300 people into that, they're earning 60,000 minimum a year, so they can afford 20,000 a year for taxes. Okay. For rent. For rent. Sorry, 20,000 a year for rent. Okay, those are young professionals, millennials, et cetera, basically like our daughter and what she's doing right now. And yes, they do live in this size. Tell you that that's exactly the size of apartment our daughter and all her friends are renting. That's what they're living. That's not the 5,000 square feet we're living. But it's what these people do. So I think what you have is, and it comes back to the quality of residents that we're bringing. When there was a proposal to order apartment complex over here on 410, the concern was subsidized. This is not subsidized housing.
It is not.
There is no subsidized housing.
No.
No, it says workforce housing is not subsidized guys, not section 8 and not low income. But you have to meet a certain percentage. They have to rent a certain amount of percentage, and there's no maximum on the percentage.
Out of the 300 units we're proposing building here, 150 of them are going to be reserved for people making 50% of AMI. Your daughter, my daughter, whomever, people, 80% of AMI, excuse me. 50% at 80%. Correct. It can't be lower because it can't be nominally lower because the size of the unit at 500 square feet or 600 square feet dictates, our market rents are going to be $1,500 a month for those units approximately. So if you're using.
No, it's 1,100.
Yeah, the smallest one, 1,100. So the person making, living for an $1,100 a month unit is going to be making $45,000 a year. You still have to qualify. All criminal background, all of that has to be satisfied, or we won't rent to them. It's no different than any apartment community in San Antonio. And, I can't make the judgment for you all on if that's a good thing for Castle Hills or not. We're simply proposing it. So in a small one-bedroom apartment, we would allow a married couple to live there, 2 people, if they wanted to. Could have 2. I will say that we're building to a parking ratio now because of Uber and some of the other technologies, 1.3 parking spaces per unit. This at 1.5, I'm very comfortable with that. I don't think we'd get equity financing for it if there were an over parking problem, or I don't think we'd get debt financing for it if there were a parking problem. So I respectfully have to.
For your financing,
Mhm.
do they take into consideration you can't park on the street in Castle Hills at night?
So what will happen is your police force will ticket everybody who's doing that, and we in turn won't get residents who
And
live
so,
there.
yeah, where are they gonna park?
We do have guest parking. It's in the garage. So there is guest parking.
Would that be on every story?
No, it'll only be on the first floor. So there will be a gate dividing the guest parking to the resident parking. Usually it's on the ramp. So wherever we ramp up, we'll put the gate there that only residents can go up there. And then outside the gate, either half the floor, maybe the entire first floor is for guest parking.
Is that included in the 450?
It is included in the 450.
So you have less than.
Yeah, but there's also 3-bedroom units where maybe one person that their son comes every other weekend at the course and they use a 3rd bedroom as an office. So it goes both ways. So even though there's a studio that maybe a couple, but usually couples don't get a studio. They'll get a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom, but it can go either way. So there's also, you know, a 1-bedroom guy or gal that may want to work from home and gets a 2-bed and uses that as an office as well. So it does go both ways.
So there's open parking on all of these projects, and just the way the flow goes normally on all of them that I've been involved with, there's a 1.5 parking ratio accommodates overflow parking. We'll also have assigned parking for folks, and the balance of the 450 spaces has been my experience that there's not a parking problem at that ratio. Where you get into a parking problem is if you're in the downtown area or the Pearl and you need 0.7 per unit or something like that. That's a really low parking ratio, but that's the way the trend is moving. At 1.5, we feel like we're being very accommodative because we want that experience for our residents. We don't want the experience that you're thinking you might have. Yes, sir. We won't be able to do the transaction at two spaces per unit because that'll increase our costs so significantly that we won't be able to do it. So if that's the outcome of the process, then we would have to pass. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think most of the couples, certainly under if we're applying the 50 at 80% rule, the household can't earn more than say 42,000 or whatever for a small unit. So the likelihood of having a car, especially with the way their cars are priced today, for a couple making less than $42,000 a year, I think would be kind of prohibitive in that budget. So yeah, I listen, maybe I'm wrong. I'm thinking about a quick budget, and that seems, having 2 cars at $600 a month seems prohibitive for a couple making $42,000 a year plus paying what they're paying in rent. So, but maybe I'm wrong. Yes, sir. So I noticed you work for Frost Bank. Very interestingly, Frost Bank is the financial advisor with a PFC that I'm doing a deal with now. And there's no advisor, or I'm sorry, there's no financial liability that the city would have at all on our transaction. Well, if it's foreclosed, let's walk down the path with that. Excuse me, I'm a little shorter than I'd like to be. If this were a foreclosure, okay, let's say we finance this, it's a $60 million transaction. We're gonna borrow 40 million and we're gonna put in $20 million of equity. The equity and the lender would have to decide this if they wanted to foreclose. We don't want the tax abatement. So the lender would have to decide they don't want the tax abatement. They would have to see that it's not worth it to have the tax abatement. And the chances of that occurring, in my opinion, are 0. So what they'd have to do is they'd have to maintain the standards of the lease that we're going to be signing with you all if we do this deal. And in order to one of the standards that we're going to have to maintain is the first class nature of this asset. So the lender would have to do that. And if the lender didn't do that, they didn't protect their asset and they didn't protect the tax abatement, that's how I think, there would be a problem. And I don't see in any world the tax abatement's probably $1.2 million a year. If you cap that on a market cap rate, that's $20 million in value or protection, whatever you want to consider. I don't see a lender willing to give that up to foreclose you all out of the deal. I think you would be named in the lawsuit, of course. I think you have a special purpose entity that's set up to insulate the city. The PFC is a special purpose entity that would, again, I respectfully disagree. The city, I'll let the lawyers talk about that. The city would be, the city of Castle Hills would be insulated from any liability that occurred within that PFC. We would be professionally managed, insured, all of those types of things. So sure, there may be some hassle factor in it for you all, and you all may get named, the PFC may get named in it, but unless you run your meetings not according to, your bylaws and things like that, I don't see how the city actually gets affected. Summer, would you mind addressing that? I don't mean to pretend like I'm a
No,
lawyer.
you're fine, you're fine. Hi, Summer Greathouse, I work with Jim at Bracewell. Feedback, y'all. So the city does not own the project. The PFC owns the project, right? It's a separate legal entity. It is created by the city, but it is not the city. It will have no assets other than this project that it will own. And yes, it may be named in a lawsuit. That has happened. That has happened on projects that Jim and I have worked on because, they're going to sue everybody who's involved. However, there is insurance that the development entity and the developer is required to carry that will cover those costs, legal costs, as well as any settlement or anything that comes out of that, as well as an indemnification. We make sure that when we negotiate these deals, that there's a very strong indemnification, which basically means that the developer and the development entity has to make us whole for any losses. So our lease with the development entity says that for anything that any expenses or losses or damages that the PFC incurs, again, not the city, the PFC, hold on just a second, ma'am, that the PFC incurs, that they have to then reimburse us for those costs or damages. Yes, you had a question? What do you mean by responsible? Could you be a little more clear? The PFC is the owner of the property. It owns the property in fee simple. It leases the property to the development entity. So Mr. Plummer spoke earlier about the agreements that we're going to have with the development entity, where they have to develop it to a certain level, maintain it to a certain level. So we'll have a development for the term of the lease. Yes. By that, you mean that they're giving up their governmental immunity by creating an entity? No. No. Yes, ma'am. Okay. I understand that, yes. Okay, but we're getting off. I'm sorry. We're getting off topic. Could you asked me a question? Could you allow me to answer it? Okay. Okay, but the difference here is that, so a public facility corporation is created by statute. And yes, ma'am, just to answer your question, I am a real estate attorney. I did go to law school. I am licensed in the state of Texas, and I have been practicing law, doing these deals for quite some time. So I did want to address your question. So I appreciate the question. I work with Mr. Plummer as an attorney, so thank you for the question. So this is a public facility corporation that is created by statute. The Texas legislature allowed for this to happen, right? For them to create a separate legal entity. It is not the city. The city is not the one acting. The actions of the public facility corporation, the money that it makes, it's not the city. So I think, again, it is a separate legal entity. The city itself is not undertaking pecuniary activity. It is not earning money. That money does not go to the city. The money goes to the public facility corporation. Again, a separate legal entity created under the statute. It's not the city. The city is the sponsor. Sure.
I'd also like to say, excuse me, I don't know this to be the facts, but I would imagine in the Grand Hyatt situation, the city probably issued bonds that they're liable for, which is
I'm not familiar with that deal. I did not work on the deal. It is not a public facility corporation though, that did that deal. It's a different structure. No, it's not. No, it's absolutely not. Okay. The city's not investing $1 in this deal. Okay. I think also you're saying what the city, you're saying that we're investing that. You're saying that, I'm sorry, can I finish? Thank you very much. I appreciate it. What you're saying is that we would definitely, I shouldn't say we, you're saying the city would definitely get that money. That's a foregone conclusion in your analysis. If a commercial venture were to do it.
I'd like to address the financial.
Go for it. Yes, you've done the market study.
So hit me with your analysis on the $45 million. So $25,000 a year for 75 years. Isn't that 15, 16 million bucks? Okay, so in 75 years, if all you got was 25% of the property tax savings, and let's assume that's $250,000 a year, wouldn't that be more significant than what you're suggesting? We have, sure, I'm sure. I'm sure you'd make that available. What we did on that is we looked at exactly what you said. And, look, I can't tell you if somebody else is going to come in and develop that property. I don't know. I know for me, this is the best use for us. So if somebody came in and did something there, I can't speculate what that would be. I know office development is very tough right now. I know, any kind of commercial venture, retail wise, is very tough right now. Maybe fast food or something else that falls under that category would be an easier pull for somebody to do. I'm sure it would be. Then I think you get into the peak hour situation that's going to be more intense than maybe what we have. I do know putting a $60 million asset on this property and you all collecting 25% of what the property tax would have been or would be is probably a better proposition than having it sit there for 10 years or 5 years and do nothing. I've been involved in office development, retail development. I know kind of the trade winds that are in the headwinds that are in front of this, in front of different sectors. And this is a pretty good space to be in, the multifamily space. So I'm confident that you all would do better in our situation than what you might get with a different use. No, sir. No, we made some assumptions. Sure. Yeah, sure. I get it. Yeah, I get it. I think I think we do pretty well again with any of that analysis, but I don't know. And I think that's something that's very easily done by a financial advisor to do that. And I think you could, I could make some very blanket assumptions, on what an office building costs, what the rents are, what the occupancy would be like, all of those things. But you're right. I'm probably biased, but I try not to be. Yes, ma'am.
Well, as long as people are here and my colleagues are waiting to stay, we'll keep on going.
I'll stay here all night. So however long y'all want to stay here, as long as they'll keep the lights on.
If Ms. Metter, Dr. Metter, if you wouldn't mind coming to the podium so we can have that broadcast, please.
I'd like to address the city council, and I'm Darlene Metter. I've lived in Castle Hills for the last 40 years and raised my family here. And Mr. Plummer talked about input from the Castle Hills citizens. And so why doesn't the city put this on the May 7th ballot and let the citizens of Castle Hills decide how they want their tax money used? We are the ones that should be able to vote on this and not just 5 members of the city council. And that's just my request. And I would appreciate if you would consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. I know that we kind of got off topic with everybody asking questions. There were some people signed up. Some of y'all were asking questions. Is there anybody else that would like to come up and say anything right now? Sure. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Pete Bella, 110 Hibiscus Lane. And I'd hope that there could be a sort of a calendar or a list of hurdles that this whole proposition must leap. My question is, when will the city be providing a decision that would encumber the city and begin the action? And I know that with board adjustments, and there's got to be a whole range of meetings that are required to check different boxes. And it would just be handy if the citizens would have some sort of a look at the scope of required meetings for the different committees from the city and ultimately where that would all lead. And whether or not it's an actual finalized calendar is less the question than what the steps are that will be required to get from here to city approval. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. And so let me just take a step back. We're going above and beyond to show as much transparency as possible. This is probably the 5th or 6th time that we've had Vaquero and Bracewell come in here to discuss things. And we've taken it a step further and had these town halls so that we can really bring everybody out here and address any concerns and make sure that we're not missing something that could potentially be in our blind spot. I can tell you that from the last conversation, and I'll probably be corrected, but it's June or July would be the time frame when we get to the point of no return, where we'd have to make the commitment. But that being said, along the way, there's different, I guess, checks that would have to be done. There's obstacles, but I completely agree. And I see my colleagues nodding in unison that we should have a calendar that is given so that everybody can, and share it more specifically, even if there might be one internally. Mr. Rapley?
Mayor, we do have a tentative timeline with action steps, and we were waiting till we had these public town hall meetings to incorporate any thoughts, input. Bracewell has put together a draft with those steps, and we are working on getting a dedicated link on the front of the page with all the information, and it would have that action plan and steps leading up to what council would have to do from start to finish.
And again, if you have a burning question, we'll be back here again, March 5th at 10 a.m. You're more than welcome to participate virtually. If you're not in the city or you're not feeling well, that option does exist. So,
Ms. Ackley, sorry. I believe it's to the multifamily.
It's general business right now,
It's
correct?
general business right now, so then the request would be multifamily. And that for this property, as Mr. Breimer said, as a developer.
What about the 3-story limit?
Eventually, again, as anything, we have, if council, ma'am, if council were to finish the deal with the developer on this project, they would have to submit their plans that would go to our third-party engineer, plan review, and the box would have to be checked to go to the BOA for it to move forward with the plan review. Again, those will be a sequence of steps if we go from the next couple of council meetings, if the council were to take action on this. As the mayor said, we're probably not at a defined end all with this project until like June, when a development deal is done, if a development deal were to be done with the developer on this project.
But if they can't do 4 stories, they don't want to do the deal because it won't provide enough apartments to make it worthy.
Again, that would have to go in front of the BOA, and that they're a quasi board, they're independent of the city, and they would make that determination.
Independent of the city.
They're appointed by the council, but they make recommendations for any variances outside our building codes.
And so real quick, I can just
Means that
clarify
the-
that.
which
What
means the
it means
recommendation
is it's
doesn't go
not
to
something
council.
that actually has to come back to council for verification. So with ARC and zoning, they'll make a recommendation and it comes to city council, and that's where the final vote is. With the Board of Adjustments, whatever decision they make up here is done. It doesn't have to go to council after that.
Correct.
Dr. Ackley.
I'd like to just make a few comments relative to this process, both addressed to the developer and to the council. That in the sense of that we're undergoing a period of climate change that's ongoing now. For the developer, I think they would be well suited to really increase or have the capability to increase the number of electric charging stations within the parking garage. And it's going to be a lot harder to do that, but we are going to electrification, and then some of the near-term timeframes of this, probably 2050, there's probably going to be a great number. The greatest majority of cars are going to be electric. So, and this has been already pointed out in the urban areas, that people don't have the capability to run electric cars because they can't run an extension cord out to the street in order to charge their cars. And the same applies to a parking garage. So I think although they're in the preliminary plan, they saw they had a certain number of charging stations. I think you have to look forward as to what's going to happen and at least wire the parking garage to increase that number of charging stations. As well, I think the city should take heed about adhering to the ordinances because the ordinances are going to change because of climate change considerations, both in drainage, in tree cover, and in walkability and habitability. The three instances of this that I see on this is that there's a certain number of trees on that lot. It's not huge, but I think it would behoove the developer to increase the number of trees that they're going to replace, not necessarily on the lot itself, but we have to increase the canopy cover in the city. For example, if you went across the street and put trees along in front of the Castle Hills First Baptist Church, this would go a long way to beautifying Northwest Military Highway and also provide that effort on it. The other thing is the drainage. The drainage is really a critical issue, and things are going to. We know that upstream development into Almost Creek is really a critical issue. And although you may be adhering to code on this particular instance, there is a need to really take a hard look at the drainage and make sure that it's not going to impact places all the way down into San Antonio, because we know that Almost Basin, for example, has undergone huge amounts of floods, and it's all related to peak flow. And the development upstream in Almost Creek goes all the way back up to De Zavala, and that whole drainage basin goes down through Almost Creek, and the development up there has really increased the peak flow down in that area. So I hope that the city engineer in the review of the drainage takes some of that into account. The third thing is when the developer talks about putting the sidewalk across in North Winston and also on Lock Hill Selma, the sidewalk on Lock Hill Selma is really a sidewalk to nowhere. So I think it would behoove the city to increase the sidewalk all the way down to the West Avenue intersection on there. Because right now it's a hazard to walk along Lock Hill Selma. And if we want to increase the walkability and the effort into that area, the businesses that are impacting at the corner of West Avenue and on Northwest Military, from the people there, that they can walk down Lock Hill Selma as well as Northwest Military Highway. I think it would be smart for the city to take some of that money that they'd be accruing at the part of it, at the first part of this development, and sink it into these enhanced infrastructure efforts that we need. But I think we really have to be much more forward-looking in terms of the ordinances, not reactive. And we had a tragedy at Wedgewood because we didn't have sprinklers installed because it was under the old code. And I'm not suggesting that the safety wouldn't be on this, but right now we're going to be talking about really entering a different phase of the impact on it. And the further stage that the developer might consider is trying to perhaps put solar panels on the roof of this apartment building and make it a renewable energy source as well as that. So these are only suggestions, but I think we have to be much more forward-looking. And the city has a great opportunity because of their impact on this, that not only do you have to adhere to the present day ordinances, but be forward-thinking about what's going to be happening in 30, 50, 75 years of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ackley.
Do you mind if I answer?
Yes, sir.
Sir, thank you very much. Those are all great comments. I'm going to remember each one you had. First one is on the vehicle charging stations. We are planning for a dual port on each floor of the garage. So there's, I guess, 4 floors. Dual ports is 8, and then we'll stub out for additional 10 on every floor, and each additional one will be a dual port. So, 20 years from now, I think everything's going to be electrified. I think everybody already knows that. We're already headed there. So, eventually, I guess each floor could support 2 times 10 is 20 times 4 floors is 80 vehicle charging stations, and that should get through at least the next 10 years, maybe the next 15 years. But it's not a problem to continue running conduit if the whole garage needs to be electrified. And the other thing is, typically a single car charge will last a week. So you're not going to have all 300 residents charging the same night every night of the week. So, maybe 20% charges on Monday, 20 on Tuesday. So they'll alternate there. So I actually think, now that I talked through this, I think 80 eventually, ultimately, probably will be enough to electrify, assuming it's 100% in 20 years or however long, and we'll get there. As far as the landscaping, I'm not sure if I understood you, but this product, hardscaping, landscaping will be as nice as you see in Alma Heights, Stone Oak, La Cantera, The Rim, Pearl, Southtown. There won't be a nicer product than this in the city. There's a beautiful courtyard that we'll have in the interior. We will try to leave and add as many trees as we can around the perimeter. Unfortunately, there's not really any trees except kind of right. I don't know how familiar with the site, but it's kind of centrally located. But we will add a lot of landscaping around the perimeter of the entire site. And then as far as the drainage, we have done a study that supports that ultimately when this project is built, there will be less water runoff than there currently is right now undeveloped raw land. And I think your last comment was, your last comment was a comment, not a question. So I hope that answered everything. But as far as electrical vehicle charging stations, there'll be plenty of those. So we always make sure that we incorporate those into all of our deals.
Ms. Nguyen. Mr. Rapley, Mr. Plummer.
I mean, we could, Mayor, if council would like. And again, if there's a cost piece that if the developer is willing to consider to pay for, we could certainly do that. But
Great, I'll take you up on that.
We'd be happy to do that. And I think there are ample financial analysts out there that represent public facility corporations that can provide that service to you. I couldn't, other than Frost Bank, I couldn't name one. Yeah,
well, I could tell you that we're looking right now at getting a consultant in from to do a retail study of Castle Hills that could also incorporate that area. But then, yes, we can also select a separate financial consultant to do the third party if necessary.
yeah. My personal opinion is that ship has sailed for the time being until you develop housing in this submarket. And retailers go to where the housing is, and you have a very stagnated amount of housing here. And, in my opinion, it's only my opinion, but if you think about kind of what's occurred development-wise here in the city, it feels to me, which is what attracted me to this community, it feels like it's been skipped over. Counterpoint, if I may, it also provides workers for retailers in your city. It also provides housing for essential personnel that's very hard to come by these days. Sure. May not be the one that the resident that you would want here that could change the dynamic or the character of the city, or add services to the city, or add the reason for Trader Joe's wanting to come here, or, you know, in my pretty vast experience doing commercial development, I think it's a tweener site. I don't think it lends itself because of the access. It is on a commercial road, but you can't have the right amount of parking on that site and feed out to Northwest Military. TxDOT won't allow it. Your access is on Winston. The city of San Antonio will not allow access onto Lock Hill Selma. So you're left with Winston. And knowing the retail business like I do, I don't see the retailers accommodating that use. Again, I could be wrong. I've been wrong a lot in my life. But I don't think I am here. I think my personal opinion is on this site, you end up with a couple of fast food sites. And I think that's what you end up with in the near term. Yeah, maybe. Maybe. No.
So Trader Joe's, you mentioned it twice. Trader Joe's loves millennials. This will bring millennials here. This isn't a market for Trader Joe's, unfortunately, but they like where the younger clientele goes. And so anyways, this would help benefit something like that. Yeah. So currently it's zoned high density commercial. You know, it's sat vacant for 30 some.
Let me answer the question. So a Trader Joe's is 10,000 to 12,000 square feet. With that, you require 5 times the amount of parking than the square footage you have there. If you could get Trader Joe's there, you need, you know, 5 per 1,000 parking, maybe 6 per 1,000 parking. And I don't think that site accommodates it. Yeah, well, you know, yeah. Yeah, you never know. You never know. I know it will come to Castle Hills, our beautiful project. Well, you know, I found your council in your leadership here very probative, very fair. Taking a little longer than I'd like, but other than that, we've had a fair shot. They've given us a fair shot, and that's all we can ask for. Yes, sir. I don't. I mean, so right at the heart, at the entrance of your city, there's a fast food chicken restaurant that's being developed. Pretty good location, in my view. To me, we're, you know, a quarter of a mile from there. So the best I can tell, the ownership group of this is from Mexico. They've owned it for 30 plus years. I don't think they were necessarily incented to sell this because I think they bought it from the RTC. They probably got it for a really good deal. Who knows what they paid for it? It probably wasn't much. And the minute the sign went up, Jared, who was driving to work, looked at it and he went, wow, the sign went up, and he called on it. So I couldn't tell you what a fair marketing would be on it. I do know a lot of very successful retail developers in San Antonio, and I called them and I asked them, I said, hey, what if we put some retail on the ground floor of this project? Because that always enhances the experience for our residents. And resoundingly, I was told the retail environment here in Castle Hills is suffering. The tenants aren't doing very well. The rental rates don't justify the expense of construction. So that's what, you know, so that's what I've heard from pros in the business. It was my guess that that's what I would find. Because if I could do retail there on the ground floor, I'd do it, because they pay more than residential tenants in the right spot. So well, if we on these types of projects, you can do that on the ground floor.
But how would you access it, and where would those retail shoppers park?
Yeah, so that's a huge driver of that. You'd have to go up a floor.
Yeah.
You'd have to create more parking.
Yeah.
You'd have to create a more interactive development. But it was something that I looked at, because in a very successful residential development, you can get $35, $40 a square foot net, which is more than a residential tenant can pay. So I looked at it, and I would do it if it was a good opportunity. Yes, ma'am. I think you could do it. I'm not an expert on your code here. Unfortunately, our zoning attorney is not here this evening, and he could answer all those questions. I believe he'll be available on March 5th. And I think that's a great question to bring up, but I imagine you could do it in a PD environment, where everything was planned, planned development, and it was done as a part of the overall process. Imagine you could do it. I can't do it because I don't think there's an economic benefit for me to do it. I don't believe in it at this location currently. So, I think this site is, I think the site is tailor-made for what we're doing, because it's on the way out of town. I think it services the USAA, the medical center. You can get to 1604 very easily. I don't think you can assume all the traffic is going to head back into Castle Hills, because I don't think that's reality. I think there's a lot of people that are going to go be dispersed elsewhere. Again, I'm no traffic engineer, but just common sense would tell me that. And I just, I think it's so accessible to so many parts of the city that for me in this use, I think it'll be very well received. Yes, sir. Again, in order to make that project work for market rate development, you need an excess of $2 a square foot net rents from a resident, or rents from a resident. We're penciling $1.75 rents. And while that 25 cents may not sound like a big deal, over 270,000 square feet times 12, it's a big deal. And this cost wouldn't justify me doing it as a market rate development. So, I would do it if we could do it. For me, I couldn't do it. So it's not my business. I don't know. I'd be speculating. I do know where costs of construction are today, and they're just increasing. I don't know, they've probably increased 20% over the last year. Hopefully it normalizes to something like 10% a year. I don't know. But that's why we need the tax abatement in order for us to de-risk the transaction. But I don't think you're affected at all. I don't think the city of I think the city of Castle Hills is a net winner out of all this, because there'll be something there that's assessed and you will get 25% of what that assessment is. I don't see the risk. Maybe the project fails. Sure, I got it. I got it. I think our structure is de-risked as much as possible. And I don't know how to answer that question. Sure.
I kind of feel like we're getting to a good stopping point. Mr. Thierry, you have to make a quick comment?
To define, I guess, Class A or Class A plus, the definition's best in class. This is a best in submarket, that you'll see around not only the submarket, but the entire market of San Antonio. It's not a condo or townhouse site. The only thing it would be a commercial retail center, which will actually put more traffic throughout the entire morning, afternoon, and night than a multifamily. We have 2 high-use traffic counts, which is in the morning, and then of course it's rush hour. So it's the morning rush hour and the early evening, late afternoon rush hour as well.
Condo or townhouse site.
It's too noisy. I can't. We're multifamily guys, but as far as there's similar overlap, but it's very noisy right there. It's very loud. It doesn't have a residential feel.
I can tell you why. Excuse me. So condominium is almost impossible to build in Texas right now because of the liability issues related for the contractor and the owner. It's a very, very risky proposition. So that's number one. Number two, I can tell you the price that we're paying for the site. And I'm not sure I'm even allowed to divulge that, but if we got on 5 acres, let's say you got 10 units to the acre, you got 50 townhomes there. Or 47 townhomes, high density townhomes. I don't think, and if you sold those for $700,000 a piece, you could pay 20% of that price. So 150. You might do better than we're doing. You'd have to get somebody to take that risk, take that condo liability risk, that ownership. And maybe that's out there. It could be. I guess if y'all don't approve our deal, you'll find out what the market will bring to the site. And I don't know what that'll be. I do know what that'll be. And I do know that your city's budget at $5 or $6 or $7 million a year, you're going to do pretty darn well under this structure. And I think you'll eclipse your annual budget every time we sell this. And I think that'll be very accretive to your community. It'll allow you to do parks. Sidewalks, trees, all the things that were brought up. I just think I think it'll provide you with a more significant economic opportunity. But I want to say in closing, I get all the questions. I get why you're asking them. I'd be asking them too. And I hope you welcome us into the community because we'd love to do it. And I think we'll do a great job. And I think we'll deliver a product that will meet or exceed everybody's expectations. So thank you all for having us tonight.
We want to thank the folks from Vaquero and Bracewell for coming out. Again, we'll be here again, March 5th, 10 a.m. Saturday. If you have any questions, you can ask them then. If you have them in advance, you can email them to the city manager. It's something that requires a calculation. We can have that in advance and hopefully have it for you that Saturday.
Mayor, we'll work on the finalizing the timeline with Bracewell, and then we'll look at the feasibility of getting the third party and get back with Mr. Brimer and let him know what that looks like as far as a cost and proposal.
Oh. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Joyce. All in favor? Okay, it is 8:02. Meeting is adjourned. Everybody have a good evening.